The soil samples were not cooperating. Nora Callum had been kneeling in the same patch of earth for 40 minutes, tweaking her collection tubes and muttering at the numbers on her scanner. The forest at the edge of Heron's Rest colony was strange ground. Something in the root network kept throwing off her mineral readings, and she had promised herself she would figure it out before sunrise. She did not figure it out before sunrise. What she got instead was a sound. It came from deep inside the tree line, not a crack of branches or the rush of something running. It was slower than that, heavier, like something large was walking carefully, trying not to be heard, and failing completely because it was enormous. Nora stayed still. She turned off her scanner light. In the gray before dawn, she watched the tree line and waited. The creature that stepped out of the forest was not what she expected. She had half prepared herself for one of the wild grazers that sometimes wandered down from the northern ridge. She had not prepared herself for a dragon. It was young. She could tell that immediately, not from its size, which was still the size of a large draft horse, but from the way it moved. There was no certainty in it. Its feet came down with a kind of testing hesitation, as if the ground kept surprising it. One wing was drooping lower than the other, dragging slightly at the tip. Its scales were the color of deep water at midday, blue-green, shot through with flecks of silver that caught what little light there was. It was also making a sound she had never heard a living thing make. Low, irregular, like a bell that had been cracked. Not aggressive, not hunting, something closer to lost. Nora did not run. She thought about it. The rational part of her brain presented several good arguments for backing away, slowly, toward the colony fence. She listened to all of them. Then she set her scanner down, sat cross-legged on the cold ground, and waited. The dragon stopped. It had seen her. Both of its eyes, large, gold-green, with pupils that shifted in the low light, fixed on her. She could see the moment it registered that she had not moved, that she was not moving. The cracked bell sound faded into silence. They stayed like that for a while. Nora's hands wanted something to do. They always did when she was nervous. She reached into her breast pocket without thinking and pulled out the sparrow. It was small, carved from pale wood, painted brown and white, hung on a short loop of string. Her father had made it the night before she left for her first field post. He had pressed it into her hand and told her sparrows always came back home. She had carried it for 11 years. When her hands were restless, she spun it on its string. The habit was as old as the grief. She spun it now. The dragon went absolutely still. Its head lowered, slowly, the way a cat lowers itself before it springs, but there was no tension in it, no coiling readiness. It was closer to the way a child leans toward something bright. The sparrow turned on its string, catching the first thin edge of sunlight, and the dragon's pupils widened until the gold almost vanished. One enormous foot moved forward, then another. It covered the distance between them in a few careful steps and lowered its head until it was level with Nora's shoulder. She could feel the warmth coming off its scales. She could hear it breathing, slow, deep, like wind through a cave. One claw extended. The tip of it, curved, the length of her forearm, came toward the sparrow with extraordinary delicacy. It touched the little wooden bird so gently that the string barely moved. Nora looked at the claw. She looked at the dragon's face. At those wide, wondering eyes. She held the sparrow out. There was a pause that lasted long enough for her to wonder if she had misread the whole thing. Then the dragon took the sparrow from her fingers with a precision that made her breath catch. Not a grab, not a snatch. It lifted the sparrow the way you lift something you already understand is fragile. The sound it made then was different. Not the cracked bell. Something clearer, warmer. 2 notes, close together. It curled its neck down and tucked the sparrow against its chest, beneath the fold of its good wing, and settled into the earth like something finally allowed to rest. Nora sat in the dirt across from it until the sun came up fully. Then she picked up her radio. "Rowan," she said, when the colony coordinator picked up. "I need you at the East Field line. Bring the translation kit. Do not bring anything that looks like a weapon. Do not send anyone who is going to panic." A pause. "Nora, what did you find?" She looked at the dragon, still curled around the small wooden sparrow, watching her with half-lidded golden eyes. "Something that needed somewhere to stop," she said. Rowan Dest arrived 40 minutes later with the translation kit under one arm and the expression of a man who had agreed to something before understanding what he had agreed to. He stopped at the edge of the clearing. The dragon lifted its head and looked at him. Rowan took a step back. "Stay there," Nora said, without looking up from her notes. "I was planning to," he said. She had spent the time before his arrival doing what she always did in the field, observing. She noted the wing drag on the right side, which looked like fatigue rather than injury. She noted the way the dragon tracked movement with its left eye more sharply than its right, suggesting that side had better light sensitivity. She noted that it had not moved the sparrow from under its wing since she gave it, and that when a bird flew overhead, it watched the bird with something that looked like recognition. When Rowan finally worked up the nerve to move closer, she waved him down to sit. He sat, stiffly, 6 meters away. "Has it said anything?" he asked. "Some sounds. Nothing the kit will catch. It's young, Rowan. Very young." "How young?" She looked at the dragon. "I think it is still learning how to be itself." Rowan opened the translation kit and let it run its passive capture mode. They waited. The dragon watched them both, then seemed to decide Rowan was not interesting and returned its attention to Nora. Over the next 2 hours, through slow gestures and patient repetition, a picture came together. The translation kit caught fragments. Basic compact trade language, the simple version that young members of elder species often learned first. The dragon's name came through as a sound the kit rendered as Siru. Where it had come from took longer to understand, but eventually Nora had enough pieces. A Corvth diplomatic vessel. A transit stop at Heron's Rest 2 days ago. A young dragon given permission for a short scouting flight. An adult crew who had, at some point between the flight being approved and the ship departing, failed to count everyone back aboard. Rowan was quiet for a long time after that. "They just left," he said. "It seems like it." "A child?" "Yes." He rubbed the back of his neck. "How does a species that old lose a child?" Nora did not answer that, because she did not have a kind answer. She had an honest one, but she kept it to herself. She turned back to Siru. "You have been here 2 days alone?" The dragon made a low sound. The kit offered a rough translation. "Waiting. Look for the sky ship." "Sky ship went." Nora nodded slowly. "We will help you." Siru looked at her, then looked down at the wing covering the sparrow, then back at her. The 2 notes sound again, the warm one. "That stays with you," Nora said. "I gave it." Rowan looked at her sideways. "Nora, that was your father's. I know what it was. You've had it for." "Rowan." He stopped. She did not explain further. She did not feel the need to. The sparrow was with someone who needed it more than she needed to keep holding it. That was enough. The harder problem was what came next. Nora requested a shelter unit be set up near the clearing, a basic field dome, something to give her a base while she stayed with Siru. The colony administrator, a man named Pole, called her within 10 minutes of the request going through. "You cannot camp next to a Corvth juvenile," he said. "I am already doing it," she said. "The liability alone." "Paul," she kept her voice even. "We have a child of an elder species, abandoned, alone, on colony ground. The Corvth are full members of the compact. If that child comes to harm here, or if it becomes known that we left it without care, the diplomatic weight of that will land on Heron's Rest. Not on me. On the colony." Silence. "I'll send the dome," he said. By evening, the story had moved through the colony the way things do in small settlements, not announced, just known. People began appearing at the tree line, keeping a respectful distance. Some brought things. Fruit. A blanket someone clearly did not think through, given the size difference. A child left a drawing of a dragon near the edge of the clearing, held down by a stone. Siru watched all of this with patient, curious eyes. What actually got a reaction was blueberries. A young colony worker named Bet, perhaps trying to be helpful, tossed a small container of them gently toward the clearing. Siru sniffed them, then ate every one with a focus that was almost funny, and stared at Bet with an expression that could not be mistaken for anything other than more of those. It was, Nora thought, the first time Siru had seemed like something other than lost. She was making notes on this when the orbital station relayed a message from the compact communication channel. She read it once, then read it again. The Corvth vessel had turned around. They were 3 days out. The message was formal, brief, and managed to sound threatening while using entirely polite language. It used the word property twice. Nora read that word both times and felt something quiet and firm settle into place behind her eyes. She set down her notes. She looked at Siru, curled in the grass with one wing tucked over the sparrow, watching the stars come out. "They are coming back for you," she said. Siru made a sound she had not heard before. Short, uncertain. The kit did not catch it, but Nora thought she understood it anyway. The full text of the Corvth message arrived at the orbital station the next morning, and by midday it had passed through 3 translators and one very uncomfortable compact liaison officer before reaching Rowan Dest. He brought it to Nora on a printed sheet, which she thought was a strange choice until she realized he did not want a record of her reading it on a logged device. She read it standing outside the field dome, in the early heat of the day. The message said, in formal elder dialect rendered into plain language, the Corvth diplomatic vessel had confirmed a juvenile was unaccounted for. The juvenile was believed to be in the custody of humans on Heron's Rest. The juvenile and all items in its possession were to be prepared for return upon the vessel's arrival. The humans of Heron's Rest were acknowledged for the interim care provided. A minor diplomatic note of gratitude would be recorded. The matter was to be considered resolved upon collection. She read the word collection and handed the paper back to Rowan. "Write a reply," she said. "Nora, I will tell you what to say." Rowan sat down on a supply crate and pulled out his tablet. She stood with her arms crossed and spoke, and he typed, and twice he stopped to ask her if she was sure, and twice she said yes. The reply was short. It acknowledged the message. It confirmed that a Corvth juvenile named Saru was present on Heron's Rest and in good health. It noted that the juvenile was being cared for willingly. It also noted, gently, clearly, with no hostility at all, that on Heron's Rest, children of any species were not described as property, and that Saru would be available to depart freely when the Corvth arrived to collect them in person. Items in Saru's possession would remain Saru's to keep or return as Saru chose. Rowan read it back. "They are going to be angry." "They are already going to be angry," Nora said. "I would rather they be angry at something true." He sent it. The 3 days before the Corvth vessel arrived were, in their own way, something Nora would carry for the rest of her life. Saru learned her name. It took most of the first day. The Corvth vocal range was wide and complex, and the translation kit kept insisting that what Saru was producing was 3 tones, not 2 syllables. But by evening, Saru had settled on something that the human ear heard as a rising pair of notes, and every person in the clearing understood immediately that it meant Nora. The colony children were not supposed to approach the clearing. Several of them approached the clearing every day. Saru observed them with a patience that seemed almost deliberate, as if the young dragon understood, on some level, that small creatures needed time to be comfortable. By the second day, the bravest of them had crept to within a few meters. Saru did not move, just watched, with those wide gold-green eyes, until the children stopped holding their breath. One girl, maybe 8 years old, held out a hand. Saru bent its enormous head down and breathed warm air across her palm. The girl made a sound that was probably the loudest a human that small had ever been. Nora wrote 3 pages of field notes about this interaction and described it as scientifically interesting because she was not sure how to describe it any other way. On the second evening, she sat near the edge of the clearing and told Saru about her father. She had not planned to. She was tired, and Saru was resting nearby with the sparrow tucked under one wing as always, and it came out the way things do when you are not defending yourself against them. She talked about a small house on a colony world that smelled like sawdust and engine oil, about a man who carved animals from scrap wood because it was what he did with his hands when he was thinking, about a daughter who kept telling him she was going far away, and a father who kept handing her small things to take with her, about the sparrow, specifically, pressed into her palm at a departure gate, with a sentence she had heard so many times it had become furniture. "Sparrows always come back." She stopped talking. The forest was quiet around them. Saru was watching her, both eyes fully open, pupils still. The kid on her belt caught a sound and offered a translation it flagged as uncertain. "You carry them." Nora looked at the kit, then at Saru. "Yes," she said. "That is what it is for." Saru made the 2-note sound, then looked down at the sparrow, then back at Nora, then pressed the wing more firmly over the small carved bird. as if understanding for the first time exactly what it was holding. On the morning of the third day, the orbital station sent an alert. The incoming vessel was not the diplomatic cruiser. The sensors had misidentified it at first. The size did not fit any standard registry entry. It took the station AI 4 attempts before it found the right classification, buried deep in compact records under a category most modern systems never needed to access. Elder ship, Corvth, ancient class. The thing entering the system was the length of a small city. It moved with the slow certainty of something that had never needed to hurry. The orbital station sent a note to every vessel in range suggesting that a comfortable distance might be a reasonable choice. Every vessel in range was already moving. 2 Corvth elders were aboard. Their names were in the compact's oldest records. They had not visited a colony world in 400 years. They were not sending a message ahead this time. Nora read the alert, poured herself a cup of water from the dome's supply unit, drank it slowly. "Siru," she said. The young dragon lifted its head. "They sent the old ones." Siru made no sound, but the gold-green eyes stayed on Nora, steady and unblinking, and there was something in them that she did not think was fear. Neither, she decided, was it hers. They came down through the atmosphere in the early afternoon, and the sound arrived before anything else. A deep pressure in the chest, like standing too close to something very large that was not making noise so much as displacing it. The 2 Corvth elders landed at the edge of colony territory, just beyond the tree line, and the ground took 30 seconds to stop shaking after they settled. Nora had seen images of elder-class Corvth in the compact's xenobiology archives. The images had not prepared her for the reality of 2 living creatures, each the size of a cargo freighter, breathing slowly, their scales catching the afternoon sun and throwing it back across the clearing in warm amber and pale silver light. The first, the larger one, was colored like deep autumn, scales of dark gold and burnt bronze. The second was almost white, a silver so pale it looked like morning frost on metal. She would come to know them as Verith and Dun. Their names were in the compact's oldest records. Looking at them, she believed it. She was standing at the center of the clearing, alone. She had asked Rowan to stay back. She had asked the colony people watching from the fence line to stay back. She had a cup of water in her hand, because her mouth was dry, and she had found that having something to hold made her calmer. Siru stood a few steps behind her, and to the left, not hiding, just present. Verith spoke first. The elder dialect came out like geological movement, words that sounded like they had been formed over centuries. The translation kit on her belt took a moment, then offered what it could. The hatchling would be returned. Items in the hatchling's possession would be returned. The humans of Heron's Rest would receive a formal note of acknowledgement in the compact's diplomatic record. The matter was to be considered closed upon departure. Nora waited until the kit finished. Then she said, "I have a few questions first." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Behind her, she heard Rowan move. She suspected he was locating something large and solid to stand behind. Verith's eyes, each one larger than her field dome, settled on her. The Amber Elder said nothing. She asked her first question. She kept her voice even and her tone respectful, because she had no interest in being rude, only in being clear. "When your vessel left this system, did you know Siru was not aboard?" Verith did not answer. The Silver Elder, Dun, turned her great head slightly. When she spoke, her dialect was slightly different. Older, more formal, but she seemed to be making an effort toward the trade language. She said that there had been a miscalculation in the departure manifest. Nora nodded. "Thank you. Second question. Your vessel left this system 2 days before any alert was issued. Is that correct?" Dun was quiet for a moment. Then, "Yes, that was correct." "My last question," Nora said. "What is the Corvth word for what a child is owed by those who are responsible for them?" Something moved through the clearing. She was not sure what it was. Not a sound, not a wind. Something else. Verith shifted his weight. The ground acknowledged it. Dun said a word in the Elder dialect. The kit did not translate it. Dun offered the translation herself, slowly. "Sacred debt," she said. "It is called Velan." Nora nodded. "Then we agree on the important things." She turned slightly and addressed both of them together. "Siru may leave whenever Siru wants to. I am not holding anyone here. That was never my intent. As for anything Siru is carrying, That is Siru's to keep or return. That decision is not mine to make, and with respect, it is not yours either. Vareth made a sound that the kit did not attempt to translate. It was not language. It was something older. Then he turned to Siru. What passed between them was not for Nora to understand, and she did not try. She watched Siru's posture shift, some tension leaving the young dragon's frame, some other thing taking its place. Siru walked toward the elders. Dun lowered her enormous head. Vareth did the same. The reunion was quiet and immense, and plainly something that had no use for translation. Then Siru did something unexpected. The young dragon turned back toward Nora, walked back across the clearing, stopped in front of her, and raised one claw. In it, balanced with the same delicate precision as the morning it had been taken, was the sparrow. Vareth extended his own claw toward the small wooden bird. He was very close. The intent was plain. Siru stepped back, folded both wings over both paws, made the sound that Nora had heard in the very first hours, the one that meant no. Clear. Certain. No. Vareth went still. For a long moment, the clearing was completely silent. A colony child somewhere behind the fence sneezed, and it sounded enormous. Dun turned her silver head and looked at Nora. When she spoke, it was in the trade language, each word chosen and placed with care. "Tell me," she said, "about the bird." Nora looked at Dun. She looked at the sparrow, still balanced in Siru's claw. She looked at Vareth, who was watching her with an expression she could not read and was not sure anyone human had ever needed to read before. Then she told the story. She told it the way she told most things, plainly, without decoration, in the order it happened. A colony world, a house that smelled like sawdust, a father who made things with his hands because he could not sit still while he was thinking, a daughter who was always leaving for somewhere farther away. She described the sparrow. She said her father had carved it from a piece of shipping pallet he found outside the freight yard, that he had painted it in the kitchen, 3 coats, with a brush that was too large for the work, that he had pressed it into her hand the night before her first long assignment, and said the thing he always said, that sparrows came back, that she had carried it for 11 years, that he had died 2 years after she left, and she had not been there, and the sparrow was the last thing his hands had made for her. She stopped. The clearing was very quiet. Dun was watching her with eyes the size of dinner plates, and in those eyes, something was moving. Nora had studied xenobiology long enough to know that Corvth facial expression was almost impossible for humans to read accurately. But whatever was in Dun's eyes, she felt it in her chest in a way that had nothing to do with training. Dun spoke slowly. She said that the Corvth did not give objects meaning, that it was a thing shorter-lived species did, binding memory and feeling to physical things, and that elder Corvth found it a difficult concept to hold. But hatchlings, before the full weight of their minds settled in, sometimes attached to objects in a way that made no logical sense. That this was considered a sign of incomplete development, something to be corrected. And so, Nora said, "You came to take it back." Dun was quiet. Then, Vareth believed the attachment was something to be moved past, that keeping it would slow the hatchling's growth. Nora looked at Vareth. He had not moved. His enormous amber eyes were on the sparrow. She said, carefully and without anger, "Where I come from, the things you hold on to after loss are not signs that you haven't grown past something. They are how you carry people who can no longer walk beside you. They are not a failure of the mind. They are proof that someone mattered." She paused. "Siru did not take my sparrow. I gave it, because I could see that Siru needed to hold something, and I understood that feeling." She looked at the young dragon. "I think Siru understood the sparrow better in the first 5 minutes than I could explain in 5 years." Vareth had not spoken since before the reunion with Siru. He spoke now. Not to Nora. To Siru. The elder dialect moved between them, too complex, too fast for the kit. Nora watched Siru's face during it. The young dragon's posture shifted twice. Once inward, tightening. Then, slowly, opening again. Siru's wings dropped from the defensive fold. The gold-green eyes moved from Vareth to Nora and back. Then Siru walked to Nora. The young dragon stood in front of her and held out the claw with the sparrow in it. Nora did not reach for it immediately. She waited. Siru made a sound. New. She had not heard it before. The kit caught it and flagged the translation as uncertain, the way it always did when something complex tried to come through a simple channel. It offered, "I give this back to you so you can carry it. I will carry it differently." Nora took the sparrow. It sat in her palm, exactly as it always had. Same weight, same smooth, paint-worn thin at the sparrow's breast where her thumb had rested for 11 years. She closed her fingers around it. Siru made the two-note sound, the warm one. Dun watched this and was quiet for a long time. Then she said something to Varith in the Elder dialect. Varith responded. Whatever passed between them, the weight of the clearing changed, some pressure releasing that Nora had not noticed building until it was gone. Varith turned toward the colony fence line, where somewhere between 40 and 60 people had gathered over the course of the conversation, none of whom were pretending to be anywhere else. He spoke in the trade language for the first time. His voice was enormous, not loud so much as deep in a way that moved through the ground rather than the air. He said that Heron's Rest had provided Velan, sacred debt care, to a Corvth young, that this would be recorded in the compact record, that the colony would be acknowledged formally. Then he said something that had no standard trade language equivalent, so he said it first in the Elder dialect, then offered the closest translation himself, carefully, as if the words needed to arrive exactly right. He said that the humans of Heron's Rest had demonstrated something the Corvth had a word for that predated the compact by 3,000 years. He said the word. The kit did not catch it. Dun translated it quietly, for Nora alone. It means, Dun said, that you sat still in the dark and let something frightened come to you. She said it as if it were a rare thing. Behind the fence, Rowan Dest was no longer standing next to his rock. He was sitting on the ground with both hands over his face. Nora could not tell from this distance if he was laughing or crying. Knowing Rowan, probably both. She put the sparrow back in her breast pocket. It had always lived there. It still did. Some things do not change by moving through other hands. They just carry more with them when they come back. The Elder ship did not leave. It sat in orbit above Heron's Rest for 2 more days, and every diplomatic channel in the Compact's regional network spent those 2 days trying to figure out what that meant. Most of the theories were wrong. The answer was simple. Siru did not want to go yet, and Varith and Dun did not insist. That was, several Compact officials later noted in their reports, possibly the strangest sentence anyone had written about the Corvth in 400 years. Nora did not think about the diplomatic implications. She had a young dragon in her field clearing and 2 days left, and she intended to use them the way she used most things, paying attention. Siru had settled into the rhythm of the research post as if it had always been there. It found a specific patch of ground near the eastern tree line that seemed to suit it and returned there each evening. It had developed strong opinions about which colony workers it liked. The criteria for this were unclear, though Nora suspected it had something to do with who moved calmly, and a comfortable indifference toward the orbital station's communications team, who kept sending formal requests to speak with the juvenile directly and kept being ignored. The colony children remained the main complication. The parents of Heron's Rest had been very clear that children were not to approach the clearing unsupervised. The children of Heron's Rest had heard this instruction, processed it thoughtfully, and arrived at the clearing in small groups every morning before their parents were awake. Siru had developed a routine. When the small ones came, it would settle itself flat on the ground, a deliberate lowering, nothing accidental about it, and become very still. Let them approach on their own time. The bravest ones had graduated to touching the wing scales. One boy had fallen asleep against Siru's flank and had to be retrieved by a mortified parent 2 hours later. Siru had watched the retrieval with an air of mild regret. Nora wrote 12 pages of notes about these interactions. She told herself it was for the xenobiology record. This was partially true. On the second evening, Dun came to the field alone. The Silver Elder landed at the edge of the tree line and waited. Just stood there, patient, giving Nora the option to come or not. Nora came. She brought 2 cups of water, looked at the size differential, and acknowledged that she had not thought the cup situation through. Dun found this funny. Nora was not entirely sure how she knew that. The Corvth did not laugh the way humans did, but something in the set of the silver scale shifted, and she recognized it the way you recognize amusement in a face you have been watching closely. They sat together in the evening light. Dun did not have an agenda. She just seemed to want to be present, which was not what Nora had expected from a being who had spent 4 centuries avoiding colony worlds. After a while, Dunn said that in all her long years observing younger species, she had seen humans do many things. Brave things occasionally, foolish things often, but she had never seen a human sit still in the dark and wait. Nora considered this. "It is field work," she said. "You don't startle things you don't understand. You observe. You wait. You let them come to you." Dunn was quiet for a moment. "And if they do not come, then you learn something too." Dunn made a low sound. It moved through the ground beneath them. "You are a strange people." "We hear that from most species," Nora said. "I imagine you do." A pause. "It is not a complaint." They stayed until it was dark. Then Dunn returned to the sky. The third morning was clear. Siru was already awake when Nora came out of the dome, which was unusual. The young dragon was sitting upright, facing east, watching the light come in. The sparrow was gone from under its wing. Nora had it, in her pocket, where it belonged. Siru turned when it heard her. Made the 2-note sound. She sat down beside it, and they watched the sunrise together, which was something they had not done since the first morning, before everything else began. It was quieter now than it had been then. A different kind of quiet, not the held-breath quiet of a strange creature and a cautious human. The quiet of two beings who had already said the important things. The colony had gathered at the fence without being told to. No announcement, no organization. They were just there. 40 people, then 60, then more arriving still. Children pressed to the fence rail. Bet from the agricultural team had brought blueberries. She held them out at the edge of the clearing. Siru walked past all of them slowly. It stopped at each one who held something out. It looked at the drawing the girl had left on the third day, the one still held down by its stone, and made a sound over it that the translation kit was not on to catch. It stopped last at Nora. The 2-note sound, one more time. Then Siru spread both wings and lifted from the ground in a rush of warm air that scattered Nora's notes and sent several children shrieking backward in delight, and climbed toward the sky, and did not look back, because the Corvth did not look back, and Nora understood that this was not coldness but a different way of carrying things. She watched until it was gone. 2 weeks later, 3 things happened that people talked about for years. The first was a formal message from the Compact Office, reclassifying Heron's Rest from observation status colony to established settlement with full recognized contact rights. This changed what the colony could trade, request, and claim protection under. It was not a small thing. It was the kind of thing that usually took 30 years of careful diplomacy. The second was a note from the Compact's Cultural Record Division, informing the colony that the term Velan had been applied to Heron's Rest in the Corvth's formal registry. The note included a definition 3 pages long and a summary at the end that said, essentially, "This means they owe you something, and the Corvth do not forget debts." The third was a package. No return identification. No message inside. Just a carved shape in deep blue-green stone. A dragon in flight, wings fully open, rendered with the kind of precision that did not happen by accident. The stone was warm when Nora unwrapped it, as if it had been held in something's claw for a very long time. She set it on her desk. She looked at it beside the wooden sparrow, which was back in its usual place, propped against the wall of the dome where the morning light caught it. She did not think of the stone dragon as a trophy. She thought of it the way she thought of the sparrow, as proof that someone, somewhere, wanted her to carry them with her. She went back to work. The soil samples were still not cooperating, and the root network was still throwing off her mineral readings, and the forest at the edge of Heron's Rest had not become less strange simply because extraordinary things had happened in it. The sparrow went back in her breast pocket, where it had always lived. The galaxy, in the way it always did when humans became involved in something it had assumed would stay simple, adjusted its understanding of what simple meant. Then it moved on, as it does, as everything does, eventually, carrying what it needs to and leaving the rest to the ground.